welcome Tara Thorne to the Let's Talk Thyroid podcast, all the way from Sydney. You're actually probably one of my closest podcast guests. Lovely to have another Australian on the show, so welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, it is really lovely to talk to someone in the same time zone. As much as I know, when we were talking previously, you do a lot of work in the Northern Hemisphere as well. And so, yeah,
Yeah,
nice just to have another Aussie on board.
it is. It's funny to talk with somebody who has a similar accent to mine. So you
Yeah, that's right.
an accent.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's
And it's good to know that there's, I mean, we know there are lots of great Australian practitioners working in this space, but
good.
we're sometimes a little bit harder to find. So I think we're not as good at that self-promotion as our North American colleagues. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's nice to, I think, be able to connect our listeners with other Australian people that they can connect with, because there are some subtle differences, and that, yeah, I think that's helpful.
Oh, absolutely. And especially when it comes to food, right? So, like, I think with supplements and such, I can usually get my Aussies the type of supplements I get my, American clients. But when it comes to food and brands,
Mm.
it's that it can be completely different. And then there are the differences. I know that you don't look at the bloods necessarily like I do, but the differences in units and all kinds of things. So, yeah, there are some subtle differences for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, and as you just said, we are going to dive into food
Mhm.
today. One of my favorite topics. Love to eat,
Mhm.
love to cook. And food was definitely my first major change I made for my own thyroid health, and as it is, I think, for a lot of us. But
Mhm.
food's really it's fundamental, isn't it? But we're going to talk specifically. I'm sure we'll delve into little tangents, but we're going to talk specifically about protein today, because it's a bit of an overlooked component and really critical for our thyroid health. But before we dive into the protein,
Mhm.
Tara, can you just give us a little bit of your backstory? What's your interest in thyroid health in particular? And I know you're interested in hormonal, perimenopause health as well. So can you just give us a little bit of a snapshot of you, and then we'll dive into the protein questions.
Okay, so I'll keep it concise because it was there's quite the story there. But when it comes to thyroid in particular, after I've got two daughters and after my first was born, I was not dealing well. I had postpartum anxiety, postpartum thyroiditis. I remember I could eat whatever I wanted to and wasn't putting on weight, which, was great. That had never been me before. I remember coming back to Australia. I was living in Canada at the time, and I could eat not that I advise this, like half a pack of Tim Tams. And I was like thinking, this is bizarre. But I was a nutcase. Like I wasn't happy. I was on edge. Long
Mhm.
story short, I went to the doctor and found out I had postpartum thyroiditis. And I'd never
Mm.
had a thyroid issue previous, and I've never had one post either. So I guess I was quite lucky in that I had the postpartum thyroiditis, but it never continued into anything. I've never had an issue
Mm.
afterward. So I've had plenty of issues with hormonal stuff, mainly sort of more PMS, migraines, things like this. But that
Mhm.
specific to thyroid was probably one of the big moments that made me think I want to dive into this further because, after I
Mm.
got the blood work, yes, it was an answer and it was kind of validation for how I was feeling, but there was no action plan, right? So, then I thought, okay, well, why? Why did that occur? And so I
Mm.
guess that kind of started the ball rolling.
Yeah.
So that's it in a very small nutshell. There's so many other things that got me into this field, like anxiety in particular, and doctors saying, "Here, take an anti-anxiety med or take an antidepressant," and me thinking, but surely my anxiety is not the result of a medication deficiency, right? So this is just the way my brain worked. I didn't want to just rely on medication. It never made sense to me that the answer is a
Mm.
medication. And I'm not saying medication is bad. I'm not saying it's not helpful and not an answer. Absolutely, there are many times we have to take medication, and I'm glad I had access to them when I did. But I guess my brain was always very inquisitive. And I was like, okay, there's got to be a reason why I'm feeling the way I am. And there's got to be something more so that I can do. Because I didn't want to put put my health and happiness in the hands of somebody else or in the hands of a medication. So I was like, okay, well, what can I do to
Mhm.
empower myself so that I can dictate as much as possible? There are no guarantees, but so that I can dictate my health and my happiness as much as possible.
Mm. And so what did you do? Like what, specifically with the postpartum thyroiditis, like
Mm.
what yeah, what did you do
Yeah.
to help, manage that, recover that,
So,
or, and work out why you might have
yeah.
triggered that?
Well, what happened was I didn't do anything big after that diagnosis other than get my wheels turning to where I think they'd always been pointed, but thinking I want to dive into health more overall. And
Mhm.
so, not long after that, I went and got my first diploma, which was in Canada as a nutritionist. Now, that was a
Mhm.
very basic sort of diploma. It was a great, great foundations, but I needed to do more. So after that,
Mhm.
that really whet my appetite, and then it was like a snowball. And so from there on, I just ferociously learned from mentors. And I've never actually been without some kind of course or diploma on the go. So then I dove into becoming a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner. I did another functional nutrition course. I went down to the Institute for Functional Medicine in the States and I did their hormone module. So I just kind of, what that did was it just snowballed my learning. And so
Mm.
I was lucky enough that I came out of that without actually doing the things that I would do today because I didn't know what they were. So I was lucky
Sure.
enough that that didn't become anything bigger. And I just
Mm.
started to learn about health and just changed the way that I ate. And changed the way that I lived, but not soon enough. That was something that I had to learn. I learned that a lot slower. I was very resistant toward that lifestyle piece, the nervous system piece, the slowing down piece. I actually ramped
Mhm.
myself up instead of slowing myself down, and that was
Mm.
very poor decision of mine. So as I learned about health, like I said, I definitely changed the way I was eating. But even still, like this was years and years and years ago. And even recently, coming into my 40s, I've had to sort of reassess things yet again and change things. So we're always growing and always learning. But yeah, there wasn't like anything particular, but there's definitely things if, as you know, if women are struggling with a thyroid issue, there are certain things like the removal of gluten, which is an absolute non-negotiable. We have all the research that suggests that gluten is quite harmful if you have a thyroid disorder, right? Maybe even going
Mm.
so far as grains, it depends on the individual, but definitely gluten-free, right? And then obviously we want to have a diverse diet of fruits and vegetables to feed the microbiome because our gut health plays such a role in the thyroid. We want to slow down, stress reduction. We want to make sure we're eating enough protein, balancing blood sugar. So there's things we can do. I just said, I was yet to learn them all.
Yeah. Well, we don't learn them all simultaneously, do we?
No.
And even that's sort of wishful thinking, and I don't think that really happens for anyone. So,
It's a
I mean, and
process.
I'm sure the things that you then went on to learn and implement would have helped to be preventing further,
Yeah.
thyroiditis. And, like you
Yeah.
don't, it's hard, you can never pinpoint those things, can you? You don't
No,
really know, but you can
no.
only look back and think, yeah, I wish I had have known that back then, but you didn't. I didn't. Gosh,
Mm,
if I had have started, my kind of thyroid friendly diet and lifestyle back when I was first
mhm,
diagnosed, who knows? But I
mhm.
didn't. And I
Yeah.
didn't even, I think I have to remember I've been slow to change. Even once I knew, like I didn't
Yeah.
know for a long time, but even once I knew, I was like, nah, no, really? Like that's too
Yeah.
hard, So I think
Absolutely.
that's part of the process.
Is. And I think, we're not taught these things, right? This information is not readily available. So we don't see it on the news. We don't really read about it in, not that I've watched the news or read magazines in years, but
Yeah,
I
that's
don't
right.
think it's readily available. And even doctors, they haven't, for again, like, not to bash doctors, but they cannot have their finger on the pulse oftentimes, right? So we don't have that information readily available to us. It's not taught to us at school. And I think that's a big part of the issue. And then, like, to what you said, it can be hard to make these changes. And so, once you make the changes, sometimes you can look back and go, wasn't as hard as I was making it out to be, which is really cool. But sometimes that initial mountain can seem quite overwhelming. Even for
Yeah.
us who are in this industry and we know what we should
Hmm.
do, we're still human. We're still
Yeah.
surrounded with life and society and birthday parties and temptation and then stress and then, so it can be tricky. But I think
Hmm.
once you start to implement the changes and feel better, it's when you start to feel better that you go, oh, this is actually, that's what I choose. And I see that in my clients all the time, right? They're like, I'm actually now choosing not to do that or to eat that instead of that because I know the consequence of doing the opposite now because they've had a chance
Yeah.
to feel better. Yeah.
Yeah. It just gets easier the
Yeah.
further you go along. The more that it's just incorporated as, well, this is just the way I eat. This is just the way
Mhm.
I, live my life,
Mhm.
then it does get easier.
It
Um,
does. It
but
really
and
does.
then I think we tweak around the edges. Like I've been tweaking recently with reducing my carb intake, and I'd already kind of had been looking at the protein piece, which we're going to talk about. But so I'd already kind of was listened to a lot of information about having adequate protein.
Mm.
Um, but I think, yeah, I thought there's still something else that's not working for my body, and um, yeah, sort of thought, well, again, like, this is the benefit for having a podcast, right? As
Mhm.
you do, is you get to talk to lots of great people. And I was talking to Dr. Sarah Myhill. She's from the UK. She's sort of written a whole book on um, the underactive thyroid, but she's also talks a lot about paleo keto,
Mm.
like the keto component and the reducing the carbs. And
Mm.
then I spoke to my doctor about it and I said, look, I'm really having trouble losing weight. And she said, have you thought about keto? And I'm like, oh, well, interestingly, funny you mentioned that. And it's been really helpful.
Yeah.
I probably focus more on reducing carbs than specifically being in ketosis, although
Sure.
I'm kind of trying to factor that in. But just that I I do feel better. My body doesn't ache as much. I've lost 6 kilos, which I don't
Wow.
know the last time that's ever happened,
Wow.
not for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
I've got more energy, like all these things. And that's just a tweak. Like, really, the most thing I've done is I've cut out my paleo bread.
Yeah.
I've kind of really reduced my sweet potato intake. Like, I've just, I'm not having the treats or the paleo treats that
Mhm.
I would have had before. I haven't really done anything else, really.
I'm just
So,
curious, like, what are you sort of aiming to hit with your carbs, grams wise?
uh, well, under 40,
Like 40.
under 40
That's pretty
grams.
low
Yeah.
carb. Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
haven't been, I sort of was measuring it a little bit when I first started. And I think I have lots of hang ups from decades of dieting that I can see the value. It's the same with the protein. Like for a little while, like I'll weigh things and then I have to get out of that
Mhm.
fairly quickly, or I get a bit obsessive, and that's not helpful for me. So yeah, I'm just sort of mindful of I'm certainly not trying to do no carbs.
Yeah.
Um, so probably just sort of guesstimating it,
Well,
probably,
it's
rather than being
interesting.
particularly scientific about it.
Yeah, and the reason I ask is because at the moment I am doing some macro counting myself, and it's not something I've
Hmm.
ever been into. But again, because I'm now in my perimenopausal years and I work with a lot of women in their perimenopausal years, I think that it can be an eye opener to really see what you're consuming. And I do think on that point, sometimes we can go, like, some women just can't lose weight. And the opposite is true. They've actually they're having too many of these paleo or keto snacks, but not sort of balancing it properly. And so that fat is just jacking up their calories or whatever. They don't quite realize, right? Eating all the nuts and
Mm-hmm.
everything. So sometimes I
Yeah.
think it's interesting to see just how much fat. And then the protein piece, I think, is the master macro, and the carbs are interesting. But yeah, it's just really fascinating to see what we're eating. But I agree with you. I am not going to live my life obsessively weighing and counting my macros. I don't think that's any fun. And I've never had any predisposition to an eating disorder, but I went to a private girls' school, so I was around it all.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it can
Me
be,
too. Me
yeah,
too.
that's
Yeah.
kind of breeds it, I think. But so that's kind of where it can get very dangerous for a certain type of person as well. So yeah, it's
Mm.
no fun to live, but like that. But I think that it is important, like you said. I think tracking protein is actually very important. Just like you just need to do it for 2 weeks. And then all of a
Yeah.
sudden you realize how much protein is in what. And oftentimes I know my clients are surprised to learn that they're not eating nearly anywhere near the amount of protein that they really should be, especially as we get older and need more to sustain that muscle mass. So that can be
Yeah.
helpful for sure.
Yeah. Definitely. And I found that too when I was like really started to dive into the protein piece. I'm like, right, okay, let's weigh this.
Mhm.
And I wouldn't have said, um, I've definitely well, never really been a low protein eater. I like my meat. I
Yeah,
like my eggs. I like, I
yeah.
like protein. Like that's not
Mhm.
been ever difficult for me, but it was definitely interesting to actually weigh
See.
and measure for a little while. And I think I just saved an image on my phone that had, some really broad, this is how much protein's in
Mhm.
this much steak and eggs and,
Mm,
chicken,
mm.
and like just to have a broad
Yeah, that's a good idea.
concept of how, yeah. So let's talk about protein.
Mhm.
um and let's just set the scene first.
Mhm.
So, when we're talking about people with thyroid conditions, which is pretty much will have to be the vast majority of my audience,
Mhm.
um, what are the why is protein important for someone with a thyroid condition?
Mm, mm. So I think one of the most important things about protein is blood sugar regulation.
Hmm.
So, when we eat a diet devoid of protein, we're going to struggle with that blood sugar. And so there are a few foundations, obviously, of our, what I like to say, our hormonal health house. But blood sugar balance is one of those foundations. So getting that blood sugar nice and stable is going to support the thyroid because it supports your adrenals. And oftentimes, just supporting blood sugar can eliminate symptoms, can eliminate anxiety or insomnia or fatigue. So I think that that is one of the key reasons. Then we also have all the nutrients in that protein and the amino acids and the minerals. Minerals are so important for the thyroid. And then as we do get older, we do tend to go into this anabolic resistance where we start to not be able to make our muscle, synthesize our muscle as well. And so, what the literature shows us is that we have kind of two options, and we should probably do both as we age, which is consume more protein, complete protein, and also do resistance training. So those are the two ways we can combat that anabolic resistance. So in my opinion, those are the three key things: muscle mass, maintaining that muscle mass as we age. That muscle is an organ of longevity for us, keeping
Hmm.
us satiated so we're not turning to the unhealthier foods. That in part has to
Yeah.
do with the blood glucose regulation, which has a few different benefits, and then getting the amino acids and all the different minerals and nutrients that the thyroid needs. That's what I would say when it comes to protein. Maybe you have some other
Yeah.
ideas too.
Uh, well, I think it probably, I mean, it's a part of that is that it helps support our metabolism. And, for those of us with underactive thyroids, that's a very frustrating part of living with Hashimoto's hypothyroidism, even when it's well managed, is it's never, well, it feels like it's never like this optimal, metabolism.
Yeah.
But I know protein helps to support the metabolism. So,
And that's in
and
part.
that muscle growth, and it's all that, like it's part of what you were just saying, isn't it? Blood
Yeah.
sugar, muscle,
Muscle synthesis.
muscle mass.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's a big one. The muscle mass supporting metabolic health.
Mm,
Like, how do you support metabolic health? Really, the most important thing is eating enough protein. And then, yeah, if you combine that with resistance training Those two things
Mm.
alone are going to help you maintain your metabolic health and your strength well into old age, right? So I think
Yeah.
the older we get, the more training we need to do, and the
That's
problem.
what yeah, I've really realized that I'm a bit older than you. Like, I'm nearly 49, and I think, yeah, like I've been, I suppose, diving into some of
Mhm.
that research and listening to people like Dr. Gabrielle Lyon.
She's awesome. Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
my gosh, it's like she's pretty, what a powerhouse.
I know.
But really listening to how important it is for that perimenopausal and menopausal, like, and as we age, and particularly as women,
Yeah,
that we need to be doing strength training and
yeah.
eating enough protein. And particularly as we age, we shouldn't be eating less protein. We should be eating
That's
more. And that muscle is so important for bone strength. And,
yes.
I
Everything,
sort of look
what
at,
lies on
yeah.
it, our strengths,
Mm.
and I think the issue becomes as we age, our digestion typically slows down, right? Our stomach acid declines. So I think it becomes really important to, and the reason I'm talking about that is because I think a lot of older people don't love to eat a lot of protein because it doesn't sit well with them. Maybe it sits in their
Uh-huh.
stomach or they get indigestion,
Mhm.
they don't feel great when they're eating it. And a lot of that can come down to low stomach acid because as we age, we have something called gastropause, which is when that stomach acid just starts to decline. So, my
Mm.
belief is that anybody who is about 40 years of age, maybe 30 or 35, depending, stomach acid just becomes part of your daily life to take morning, noon, and night to support the breakdown of that protein and to actually be able to absorb your nutrients from your food. So, until research comes out to prove me otherwise, I think that stomach acid is one of those forever supplements. There's a few supplements I think if we brought them into nursing
Mm.
homes, that we could alleviate a lot of symptoms. So stomach
Mhm.
acid, B12, there's a couple of things that you could just put on the nursing home kitchen table, be like, just take them and it would really alleviate a lot of stuff. But yeah, I think if anyone's listening going, I can't get the protein in or I don't digest protein well, look to your digestion. And then, you can
Mm.
unravel that ball of yarn, right? Because you
Oh,
have
yeah, massive, massive, yeah.
story, you could have reasons
Yeah.
why, and then you can't eat your way out of H. pylori, for example. You got to go in there
Mm.
and kill it off, and it's all about terrain. So that gut health is a huge part of the picture. But if you
Mhm.
don't like your protein and you can't stomach it or whatever, there's something going on. It's time to, like I like to say, look under the hood, right, and see, well, why?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because there's that eating the right foods, but there's also cleaning up whatever mess might already be there, and
Mhm.
healing the gut.
That's right.
I was talking about this with my naturopath, who I took
Mhm.
my 15-year-old to recently because he's got a lot of acne,
Yeah.
and that's what she was explaining to him, and it was a good reminder for me. She said, "Yeah, we've got to take out the foods that are causing problems with the gut, that's then having a flow-on effect to the skin,
Yeah.
but there's also, we've got to heal the gut. You can't just take the things out and then you're still leaving the leaky gut to leak. It's helpful, but it's not the full picture. And I think that is a good picture that,
Mhm.
yeah, it's not just about taking things out and eating healthy food. If you've got a problem with your gut, well,
Mhm.
that has to be dealt with as well. And that's where, working with a knowledgeable practitioner is really helpful, because they'll know which are the
Yeah.
what element of the gut needs healing and how do you actually do
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and supplements do play a
Yeah.
role, bringing in
Mm.
certain supplements to support that mucosal lining, the supplements to support digestion,
Mm.
you can even go so far as like, is it a hydrogen dominant gut? Is it got more histamine producers, a methane dominant gut, and then like I often say, like I said before, you can't always eat your way out of that. Sometimes
Mm.
you got to bring in the antimicrobial. Sometimes you got to kill some stuff because that's crowding out the good guys. And if you kill off the bad, you can then bump up the good guys with diet, but also with like prebiotics and things like that. So,
Mhm.
yeah, it can take a couple of protocols to really get it right and
Yeah.
improve that terrain so that you can digest better, right? And get the benefit
Yeah.
out of your foods. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So with protein, I mean, is there a certain type of protein that's better? Like maybe we talk about different types of protein, then we can talk about quantities, and then we'll cover, well, how do we actually get enough protein? Like what does it
Mhm.
mean? What does it look like on a plate? So, but are all proteins created equal?
I don't think so. I don't believe so, no.
Mm,
No, I think you must have animal protein, and of course you're gonna have outliers, but I would be so rich if I had $1 for every person who told me they had gone vegan or vegetarian and health issues ensued. So, each to their own, and, but my belief is that animal protein is important. It is a complete protein, and it's hard to get, in particular the leucine that's important for that muscle synthesis. It's really hard to get that on a plant-based diet. So that's my
mm,
opinion, and there's just so many nutrients that are lost when you're on a plant-based diet. So I believe
mhm.
animal protein is the best type of protein. It's the complete protein, and you can couple that with a ton of vegetables and some fruits for sure. That's important. Um, so that's my belief on like the type of protein. I don't know if that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that answers that question because I get that question a bit, and I'm not a nutritionist, so but yeah, I don't know. I just like animal protein. I can't imagine it personally. Doesn't appeal to me to not eat it. So, but
Yeah.
that's very different. That's a personal preference, I suppose. So,
We
but
also
it is interesting because
Sorry, I cut you off.
no, you go. That's all right.
Well, I was going to say, in the research, what we see too is that it really supports that glucose metabolism as well. And actually, what we
Mm,
see is that you want to aim, and we'll get to the how much we're going to aim for. You want to aim for about 30 grams plus of protein at your first meal. So these are kind of the studies that I've been reading about the protein type, the complete protein, how much,
mm,
and why it's important. But yeah, I'm all
yeah.
for team animal protein.
Yeah. And within animal protein, are all proteins equal? Or, are some types of animal protein better than others? Like is red meat or chicken or fish or, like what's your view
Yeah.
on that?
Probably, but I don't have a strong opinion on that at the moment. But I do find that the red meat seems to, anecdotally anyway, it's not something I've like read lots of studies on, but anecdotally, that red meat seems to really satiate myself and my clients a lot better, oftentimes, even than things like chicken. So I'm not sure. That's a diving into the individual types of
Mm,
proteins within the animal protein. So that is an interesting one that I'm yet to sort of do.
mm.
Yeah.
No, that's all right. That's fine. I mean, maybe, if we're talking about having a bit of a variety anyway, probably kind of
Yeah.
balances some of that out. But yeah, look, yeah, I really, yeah, I'm a red meat fan, but I certainly eat a lot of, we have a lot of chicken in our house,
Yeah.
fish, not a lot of fish, but I like fish, but fish I find vexed because are you meant to have it farmed? Are you meant to have it free, like wild caught? What's
Mm.
the mercury? Like I find fish a complicated thing, but I like it.
Well, when I lived in
Yeah.
Canada, we had a lot of salmon because we had wild salmon and it was inexpensive. But here
Mm.
in Australia,
Uh-huh.
you
It's
can
so
get wild
expensive.
salmon, but it's cost prohibitive.
It
So but
is.
we used to eat a lot. We would eat salmon, not a lot, because I'm not a huge seafood fan. I wish I was, but I'm just not. But we would eat salmon usually at least once a week, and we'd eat halibut once a week. But can't
Uh-huh.
really do that here in Australia so much. It's so expensive.
Mm.
I do think fish can be good, the low mercury fish. And that's talking about thyroid health and fish. One thing I see a huge correlation, clinical correlation. I run HTMA tests, so they're the hair tissue mineral
Oh
analysis,
yeah.
and you
Mhm.
can see heavy metals on them. And so, just for anybody listening too, a little tidbit, but if you're eating tuna, because a lot of people, especially in Australia, I don't think so much in Canada, maybe, but in Australia, like tuna's a thing. Like I remember when I used to work in offices and everyone would bring in their little tins of tuna and rice. Not a fan. I like
Oh,
it.
it just says diet to me. I
It
think
does
I ate
say
some,
diet. It does. It does.
tuna, cottage cheese, and grapefruit all spells
Yeah.
diet. To me, that's like 80s diet.
It's
Tuna,
so
yeah.
easy.
So
It's so easy.
I think I just have a bit of a block around tuna, so I don't
It's
really
funny.
buy it.
Well, I
Yeah.
don't eat it. I don't eat it. Like, I don't eat it at all, only because the mercury that I see, if somebody has high mercury on an HTMA, I have never
Mm.
once spoken to somebody with high mercury who wasn't eating tuna every week. The correlation
Ah.
is
Mm.
crazy. And these people usually, if not always, have a thyroid issue. Mercury in particular is a really bad heavy metal
Mhm.
for the thyroid. So anyway, that was a
Yeah.
little side note about tuna, mercury, thyroid, no bueno.
Mm.
Not a
Helpful.
good
Yeah,
idea.
that's
But
good.
otherwise, seafood, low mercury seafood is a great idea if you like it, right? And then the
Mm.
beef and
Mhm.
the chicken. But then you were also asking like other ways to get protein in. And I think it can be
Mm.
tricky sometimes, especially for the people that are trying to watch their weight, right? Or they're trying to lose weight, because let's say you're eating, for example, a lot of dairy, right? And then that dairy can be quite high in fat. And yes, it's good for protein. So, I think you got to think about ways to get protein. I think you've got to get a little creative at times. So
Mhm.
like obviously the chicken and the beef, and whatever animal proteins you like. I'm not very adventurous. Sometimes I will buy like the ground beef with the heart in it or with organ meat in it. I do try to do that and then make spaghetti bolognese or whatever. But I
Mhm.
think also
Mhm.
like bone broth is quite high in protein, and you can buy those powdered bone broths and they're low in
Yeah.
fat. So you can bump up your protein that way. I think
Mhm.
collagen peptides, that is such an easy way. So if you drink coffee or you drink matcha or you drink something else, you can just get a scoop of collagen peptides and put that in your beverage. Really, you can put that in
Mm.
whatever you're eating. So I think that's a great way to
Yeah.
bump up your protein as well. So the bone broth, especially the powdered form, if you're watching the fat, or maybe you're on keto and you want the fat, and then the collagen, and then the eggs, and then all the different types of animal proteins, I think are fine. Like we discussed,
Mm.
mercury.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you mentioned before sort of trying to get at least 30 grams from the first meal. So is there an overall like daily protein target, and is
Yeah.
that weight dependent or age dependent?
Listen, what I tell my people is that you want to aim for about, and again, I still use pounds because
Ah, oh, well, that's not very helpful for an Australian audience.
not very helpful. Because most of my clients are in the US, and even our scales
Yeah, yeah.
here, because we lived in Canada for so long and we go back to Canada, even the scales at home here are in pounds for my husband and I.
Ah.
So I'm going to really
Okay,
show you, and I'm not going to do the math because I can't.
that's
So,
all right. Yeah.
but it's probably going to be very easy math. So basically, what I like to say is aim for 100 grams a day to start of protein, but ideally what you should aim for, and I think this is more important the older we get, is to aim for 1 pound, 1 gram of protein per pound of ideal body weight. So
Yeah.
say you want to lose weight, and you're looking to weigh 140 pounds, whatever that is kilos, then you're going to be eating 140 grams, or aiming for that 140 grams of protein per day.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's sort of spread across 3 meals, or how does,
Ideally,
does it
I
really
think
matter, or?
I don't know that it matters. I think the most important thing, though, is that first meal of the
Mm.
day. So I think that's where,
Mhm.
and I don't know whether people are fasting or not, but the first meal that you take in is what the research is showing is the most important meal to get that really good
Mm.
whack of protein, upwards of 30 grams. And
Yeah.
so, you might want to do 50 grams at breakfast time, because that's going to
Mm.
satiate you. That's what really gets that glucose regulated. Um, and there are other reasons too, but I think that that's the first meal of the day is the most important, and then you
Mhm.
get it in the next two meals. Maybe you have a couple of snacks. I mean, I'm a big proponent, if you can, it's not always the way, right? But if you can, 3 meals a day is great. If you're snacking too much, you can mess with your blood sugar, your insulin. It can cause
Mhm.
that insulin spikes, can be harder to lose weight. So if you can, just 3 meals a day, and then figure out, everyone's individual, where you're going to get how much protein in each meal, right? And that's where that tracking starts to help, if you just do it for 2 weeks and then you get an
Yeah.
idea of how much protein is in that smoothie that you usually have, or oh wow, you're not
Mhm.
eating quite enough meat at dinner time, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah. Yeah, and as you say, you don't have to do it forever. Just doing it for a little while is helpful, and it's not like um, like 100-gram piece of steak is not 100 grams of protein. So I
No.
think that's the other thing. I mean, it's not hard to just do a bit of a Google search and have a look it up. Some of
Yes.
the I when I do go through a small period of tracking, I use my FitnessPal app,
Hmm. Hmm.
and it has, you can put in, for example, 100 grams of steak,
Oh,
and it'll tell you how many grams of protein it is. So I found that helpful.
yeah, yeah. There's so many different macro apps out there, but my
Mm,
is like the one of the original. Yeah, but yeah, that's a good point actually, because if you've never tried before, I was talking to somebody not long ago who was sure she was getting enough. Actually, it was a friend of mine, and she was sure she was getting enough protein because, and then she said that very thing. But I'll have 100 grams of steak or whatever, and that's my protein. I'm like, no, that's not the way to track it. So yeah, it's very different. So that's a very good point. Yeah.
mm. And so, okay, so let's talk. I mean, I should just say, if you don't already follow Tara on Instagram, follow, because you share lots of really practical
Hmm.
foods and snack ideas and all sorts of different things. So lots of really great content on your socials. So go follow if you don't already. But I thought, let's talk about some of those things, because this is where it gets practical, isn't it?
Mhm.
So, and some of it's we've touched on, but what would be a typical day's worth of food for you? Like, what does it look like for you?
Yeah, well, it varies. It definitely varies. But so
Mm-hmm.
this morning I had a smoothie. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
love it, but I had it.
What goes into your smoothie? What's a smoothie for you?
Morning, all I had, it was very basic, it was a bit bland, but that's okay. That's okay. So I like a brand of protein called Equip. And now very hard to get in Australia, very quite expensive. So there are other options. I
Mm-hmm.
in Australia, I'm not so great with the protein powders here, but this particular one is a beef isolate. And so that's why I like it.
Mm-hmm.
It's 4 ounces of beef in each scoop, and you can get it in flavors or unflavored. So I use the unflavored one. I do a scoop of that, it's
Mm-hmm.
about 21 grams of protein, but then I top that up with a scoop of collagen. I use the organic one here, Natura, I think it's called Organics. So I do a scoop of
Okay.
that, which is, I think it's 18 grams of protein.
Oh,
Pretty,
the Nutra Organics, the ones in the
yeah,
tins?
yeah, that
Yeah.
one. I think
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
So I think it was
Yeah.
roughly 18 or so. Anyway, and then I had some blueberries, frozen blueberries. I had some cauliflower, frozen cauliflower. I had some flax seeds. I put a bit of coconut water in. I do that for the potassium. And then I didn't have anything. I sometimes will use that Nutty Bruce coconut milk because it's pretty clean.
Oh, yeah.
But
Yeah.
instead, I just had some water. Pretty
Mm-hmm.
basic. And then I put some powders in that I'm using at the time, right? So it was pretty
Yeah.
basic, but that was about, I think, 41 grams of protein, if I check my little app.
Mm.
So 44
Mm-hmm.
grams of protein in that, which is pretty. Oh, I
Yeah,
put
that's a
some
lot.
spinach.
Yeah.
I did put some spinach in. So
Mm.
that was a great way to start my day. Um,
Yeah.
but then, the other day I cooked up some turkey. So I had turkey mince. I threw garlic, ginger, some organic tamari, some spring onions, and I had the turkey mince. And I think I had a side of berries with that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so, you know, and then some mornings I'll have eggs, and people are shocked to learn that sometimes I'll have 5 eggs. But that's kind of protein because an egg is about 6 grams of protein. So it's
It's
not.
not much. It is really not much protein. When you think, oh yeah, I have eggs for breakfast, and that was actually something I learnt when I started to focus on protein, because I was like, I have eggs for breakfast every morning, but
Mm,
2 eggs is like about,
no.
yeah,
Well, of
12,
course,
14 grams of protein. It's like, that is not enough.
not enough, right? So
No, not
that's why
even nearly enough.
not
Yeah.
even nearly enough. Not even half. So you gotta get
Mm-hmm.
creative. So that's kind of typically breakfast. And then
Mm,
lunch will kind of be the same. Maybe I'll have a salad
mm,
with chicken, or maybe I'll do a smoothie if I didn't do one at breakfast, or maybe I'll do the ground mince. So I did ground beef last night, and I made a little like Mexican bowl, ground mince with some garlic salt, with some black beans, some jalapenos. I do dairy personally, so I did a bit of cheddar cheese, and I did
mm-hmm.
homemade salsa, tomato, red onion, cilantro, coriander, whatever we call it here. I don't know.
Yeah.
I get confused.
Coriander. Yeah.
Coriander. Okay. And that kind of thing, right? But you could eat that for
Mm,
breakfast, right? But I ate that for
yeah.
dinner last night. You could eat that for lunch. So it's all, and I think that's the key is we've got to get out of it, this breakfast food mentality, which is sweet,
Totally.
right? And
Yeah.
listen, I will never, I want to be as real as possible and as transparent as possible. And I don't always want to have a savory breakfast. I don't know. And especially the mince meats, they're good, like chicken mince and all that. It could be very good. And you can just do it very simply, easily, and they're easy. But sometimes I want to have something a little bit more sweet. So it's either the smoothie or it's like a yogurt bowl. Again, I do dairy. Some people just can't.
Mm,
But a
yeah.
Greek yogurt, but I'll put some of that protein powder in the yogurt because Greek yogurt, there's
Uh-huh.
not nearly enough protein. So I'll bump
Mm,
it up again. So I think that's the key is I do believe we need a good protein powder and the collagen. Those two things help us to
yeah.
really bump up that protein. And
Yeah.
then dinner can be steak or it could be a plethora of different things. Sometimes I'll make a shepherd's pie,
Mm,
right, with the beef mince, and then maybe I'll put some lentils or sometimes I'll put beans in, and then all the leftover vegetables. Um,
yeah.
so there's lots of different ideas, but I think, dinner for breakfast is fine. Dinner for breakfast, dinner for lunch, dinner for dinner. It's fine.
Yeah.
It's good. It's healthy.
They're all interchangeable. That's like I've been
Yeah.
saying that for years too. Like we've got, uh, yeah, we getting out of the, well, certainly the cereal and toast
Yeah.
mentality for breakfast, super helpful. Like if you're trying to give up gluten, like if perhaps you're listening and you haven't given up gluten yet, or you're finding that hard, a good way. I think it's breakfast that people struggle with if they've
Mm.
grown up like most
Mm.
Australians, maybe most Americans, Canadians, I'm not sure,
Sure.
eating
Yeah, for sure.
cereal
Cereal.
and breakfast for, cereal and toast, then and you think, "Oh, okay, now how do I make that gluten free?" Well, you
Exactly.
can, but it's not a great breakfast. Like
Well, then you
it's not
and
great
then
from a
also
nutritional perspective.
that's right, and you're not gonna get that whack of protein. If you eat like that in the
Yeah,
morning, good luck getting that whack of protein. It's not gonna happen. You're gonna get a huge carb
yeah.
hit, and your blood sugar is just
Mhm.
gonna go skyrocket and then crash back down.
Mhm.
So those breakfasts, once in a blue moon as a treat if you really want to, but
Mhm.
they're not healthy by any means.
No. No, exactly. So, I mean, I will often cook. Actually, I'll buy like steak sandwich steak, the thinner cut steak.
Yeah,
And super quick to cook up for breakfast,
yeah,
and then have that with a couple of eggs. And I
absolutely.
think I've worked out, it's probably about 40 grams of protein altogether,
Yeah,
depending on how big the steak is. But the, you know, the, s- the thin steaks,
yeah.
um, are quick to cook. So, because I think that people are looking often for quick and easy. Well,
That's a
like
good
I
idea.
mean, you could fry the eggs, but I'll just do that with, um, I mean, I work from home, so I'm not sort of racing out the door
Yeah,
trying to get breakfast ready. But like I will do, that's where your minces and things like that definitely helpful. But yeah, a steak, I can poach a couple of eggs, and then I might just have a handful of spinach leaves, or
yeah,
some sort of. If I've got leftover salad from dinner last night, I'll add that. Um, I used to have the eggs on a piece of paleo toast, so that's probably what I've cut out
mhm,
the
mhm,
last couple of months.
mhm.
Um, and look, let's face it, I probably prefer to have the the paleo toast with my
I
eggs, but at the
paleo
moment, I'm doing all right without them.
is that the
Sorry.
the actual those bricks of paleo bread? Does it say paleo on it? Those like 50.
Oh no, the brand, yeah,
Mhm.
the brand I like is called Almond Road.
Oh, okay.
They're made in Byron Bay, so I'm not quite sure how easily you get them in Sydney. Like I get them in my local kind of health food shop up
Mhm.
here. Um, I like that better than the paleo bread brand
Yeah,
personally. That's
yeah.
personal taste,
Okay.
really. But they're like a brick. They're definitely solid like a brick and
Yes.
quite high in carbs.
Yeah.
Ones that you only need one piece. But anyhow, like I've cut that part out and still can
Yeah.
have my steak and eggs for breakfast,
Yeah,
and
you can even have
or I'll do
salmon
like a
for breakfast. People can even have salmon
yeah.
steaks for breakfast. Yeah.
I was just about to say that's another common breakfast for me, and I have been doing a bit of eating a bit later, like my first meal about 11ish.
Yeah.
As I might do like 3 egg omelette and then some hot smoked salmon, like a whole piece of hot smoked salmon. Throw in some again, some spinach or some veggies.
Yeah.
And that's a really substantial breakfast
Yeah, absolutely.
too. So,
There are so many
mm,
ideas, and it just takes a little bit of like researching and Googling and, to come up with what works for you. And then the people that don't work at home, right? Yeah, maybe get a little bit more creative. Sometimes you can put together smoothie bags and put them in your freezer and just dump them in and take them with you in a mason jar. Or maybe you make like, these homemade egg muffin cups, and it's probably not enough protein in one. You could take a couple and then maybe, something else on the side. Like, yeah, it just takes a little bit of thought and you can come up with stuff for sure.
yeah, yeah, definitely. I think so. Once this airs, like in my little Let's Talk Thyroid Facebook community, we might share some different ideas
Mm.
because I think, I mean, I always get different ideas from different people, and that's why I've like enjoyed some of your posts. Like I think one of the things that stood out the other day along the tuna line, but it wasn't tuna, but it was like the tinned salmon, getting some tinned
Mm.
salmon and pour that over some salad. I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good idea. I should probably do that. That's very easy. You
Yeah,
could
we
do
forget,
that,
don't
you
we?
know.
We forget about options. So yeah, it's good to
We
share.
just need ideas. We just need
Mhm.
ideas. And then if you're in the mindset of this is what I want to do or this is how I feel good, then you're just looking for ideas. It's
That's right.
not that hard.
It's not that
Yeah.
hard.
Can you have too much protein, Tara?
I would think you could, yes. I would think so.
Mm,
Like anything,
yeah.
I would think so. But I
Yeah.
think it's usually the opposite. It's usually that people aren't
Mm,
getting enough. Yeah.
yeah.
Like anything, you could overdo
Yeah.
it. Mm.
Yeah. Probably harder to I mean, it's hard to eat, you know, a lot of protein 3 times a day.
It's very hard. It's
Which is why
easy.
people don't eat enough. So it's probably is
Yeah.
harder. My point being, it's harder to overdo it
Oh, very
because
much
it
so.
does. Yeah,
Well, it's
yeah,
easy to eat a whole packet of Tim Tams, but it's not easy to
hmm
eat like a ginormous steak, right? So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
don't see that
Exactly.
too often.
Yeah. Um. wait, what do I want to ask next? Like in terms of protein, is there something I haven't asked you that you think people need to know?
No, I don't think so. I think that's kind of key without
Mm.
going into, crazy complex stuff like that.
Yeah,
They're
yeah,
important
yeah.
things, right? How much to get, what to aim for,
Mm,
when to eat it, what kind to eat, what are the different ideas.
yeah,
I think that probably covers it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I think that's been really, really helpful. Really positive, practical. That's what I like this show to be,
Good.
positive and practical.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
yeah, so I think if you're listening and you haven't, sort of, if you're not even aware of how much protein you're eating, like Tara said, why don't you just track what you normally eat first? Like, don't even make an effort to eat more. Just track what you're normally eating for a week, even for a few days. It gives you a bit of an
Yeah,
idea as you think,
that's
oh gosh, I thought I was eating a lot of protein. I'm having 2 eggs for breakfast. Like,
that's right.
that was a realization for me. Like, okay, that's not enough.
Well, that's
So
why I
how do
do
I?
that's
Yeah.
why I do those posts, like 2 eggs for breakfast is leaving you protein deficient,
Mm,
because that's
yeah.
what we've all grown up with. You have 2 eggs. You don't have 3. You don't have 1,
Well,
you have
and that's a high protein breakfast. Like, like I think that's what people think of. Oh, I have eggs for breakfast. I'm having my protein.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's funny,
We
sorry, go ahead, sorry.
no. All I was going to say was the farmer's breakfast. Like, when you go to a cafe and you order like the farmer's breakfast, that's what we should be having: steak, eggs, sausages. Like have
That's right.
if you're getting good quality, that is a really good hearty breakfast.
100%, exactly. But so many people get up in arms about those posts about 2 eggs is not enough. They're like, "What? I can't have 5 eggs." It's like, "Well, you've never tried it." So maybe
Mm,
go, because if you do, if you can tolerate eggs, the premise of that is not that you need to be eating eggs at all.
yeah.
Sometimes people
Yeah.
miss the point. It's not you must eat eggs. If you don't agree with eggs, you don't like eggs, fine, find something else. The premise of it is increase the protein. And so if we get out of our own way sometimes and give it a go,
Mhm.
the amount of people who are clients and non-clients on social media who have said, I have actually changed because of your posts, and it's changed my
Mhm.
life, people say. So upping
Wow.
protein, I think, can really alleviate and
Change
even
your life.
get rid of symptoms and change your life. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that is a very hopeful message to leave, to leave on because, um, Yeah, if you can find something simple that has a really profound impact on how you feel, your energy levels, ultimately your thyroid health, which impacts everything, then why not give it a go?
That's
It
right.
could change your life.
Change
Yeah.
your
Tara, how should people connect with you if people wanted to work with you or you're taking
life.
clients? Like, tell us a bit about,
Mhm.
what you offer to clients and how people can
Yeah,
connect with
sure.
you.
So usually the way that women work with myself, and I also have a team, is via my online program called the Hormone Balance Solution. So that's like what we call a hybrid program that has one-on-one consultations, group coaching as well, lots of resources. We do functional testing. So that's how people can work with us. To find out
Mhm.
more about that, you just go to my website, tarathornenutrition.com. But I think the best way for people to maybe get a feel for me and even get in touch, you can DM me, is over on Instagram, which is just at Tara Thorne Health. So that might be the best way.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's how I came across you. I can't
Mm-hmm.
remember originally, but yeah, I'd been following
Oh,
you for a little while, and before I connected with you. So yeah, I think
awesome.
that's social media at its best.
Yeah,
There's lots of downsides to
lots
social
of
media, but
downside. Yeah, but that's a good.
if you can take some good resources and get to know the
Mm-hmm.
style of people, the
Yeah,
way people
exactly.
work or the way people
Mm-hmm.
think, or the kinds of things that they promote, then I think that's a good side of it. So
Yeah.
thank you for all of what you do contribute to the
Oh.
health community, because I know you're not solely thyroid focused, but a lot of your posts are.
Mm-hmm.
um, and if you're like me and listening, and you're in your 40s heading towards your 50s, which is, let's face it, a lot of people with thyroid conditions
Mm-hmm.
are diagnosed in that perimenopausal menopausal period,
Yeah.
then yeah, definitely you want to get to following Tara and
Oh,
all
thank
of
you.
her hot tips.
Thank
So
you.
thank you very much. Thanks for
Oh, it's
coming. Thank
fun.
you
Yes.
for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation and you've got lots of ideas now of different ways that you can get protein into your day, into your diet. And so I want you to have a think now. This is the KISS Thyroid Coaching segment, KISS meaning keep it super simple. So I'm going to keep it really simple. First of all, one, if you don't actually know how much protein you are eating, then I'm going to challenge you to keep track of your protein just for the next week, or even if it's just for the next 3 days. Weigh out your protein part of your meal. Have a look at an app, something like My Fitness Pro, My Fitness Pal, and just keep a record of your protein intake and just see if that matches up with what Tara was saying about the optimal amounts of protein, particularly in that first meal of the day for your protein. And so then what I want you to do is, when I'm sharing in social media, particularly around getting some ideas for food, I'd love to know some of your protein-rich favorite meals. You're very welcome to share recipes, links, all those things, so that we've got lots of inspiration for our own different meals. So that's it. Keep it nice and simple. Track your protein, check you're getting enough, and share some meal ideas. Have a fabulous day, everyone. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Let's Talk Thyroid. If you have enjoyed the content, or perhaps you're thinking, oh, my mum needs to hear this, or my sister, or my bestie, I would love it if you would share this episode with them. That really just helps spread the positive and practical message of Let's Talk Thyroid, and helps that broader thyroid community, our friends and family, to live well with their thyroid health. So you can just, share the episode. If you subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to this podcast, it's free. It's really helpful, because then you'll be notified every time a new podcast comes out, and it just makes it much easier to find. There's usually a little subscribe button, or a bell, or follow often is the terminology. So if you wouldn't mind doing that, that would be helpful. Of course, if you want to leave a review, even better, just a sentence or two about how the podcast has helped you. You can definitely connect with me via letstalkthyroid.com. That's where you'll find access to my book, my coaching, my freebies, and really everything that I offer in terms of thyroid support.